watching this, watching Security Council, watching the Capitol in Washington, but watching all of that with us is Javed Ali. I want to invite him to the program now. He's a former White House counter-terrorism official. He's joining us from Washington. Thank you so much for making time for us, sir.
Of course, Natasha. Nice to be with you. I'm actually in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but that's a small detail.
Well, no, it's an important one, and thank you for correcting me on that front. So let's not get anything else incorrect. Let me ask you for your analysis on what we have seen Iran do within the last couple of hours and its capability to push back against Israel.
Sure. So I recently had an article published with a lot of my commentary in it, or all of my commentary in it, and a platform called The Conversation, where I really walk through in depth sort of my assessment of, what's happened so far and what potentially Iran can do next. We've seen over these last couple hours, the Iranian ballistic missile attacks were likely ballistic missile attacks. We heard early reports of drone attacks, and that's out of the playbook they used last year when attacking Israel. They did this twice in April 2024 and then October. But I think what Iran is doing is escalating the volume and the intensity of these missile and rocket attacks. But that's only one aspect of their toolkit when it comes to capabilities. And as I explained in this piece, or tried to explain, there are other things that Iran could do that it hasn't done yet. And if these things were to happen, which would include acts of terrorism or supporting acts of terrorism, that will dramatically escalate things too. So there's a lot of volatility even in the current dynamics, but Iran has by no means exhausted its capabilities that it has right now.
Can you lay that out for us a bit more? I understand you've written this piece for The Conversation. What are its capabilities? Because if we listen to the Israeli argument, they've leveled Iran. Iran has never been weaker. We've heard from the Israeli prime minister saying the people of Iran have their best opportunity now to rise up. What is the reality as you see it?
Well, I would agree with the IDF assessment, and certainly these last 12 to 24 hours. I mean, this is a qualitatively and quantitatively dramatic escalation of military operations and covert action and sabotage and in combination against Iran. But all of that said, Iran is still a large country with a large military, both on the conventional military side and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, even though Israel has decimated its upper leadership with these targeted strikes against several senior Iranian military commanders or IRGC commanders. But going back to the rocket and missile capability, Iran probably possesses thousands, if not tens of thousands, of these weapon systems alone. And they've probably only barely sort of dug into that inventory that they have, despite whatever Israel has tried to take off the table for them in these recent operations. So that's one. Iran can also launch cyber operations against Israel or other countries. They have done that repeatedly over the years. Again, we may not know if Iran is trying to launch cyber operations. Obviously, they don't have a physical effect, at least initially, but that's a capability that we know publicly that they have. That on the terrorism side, they may not be able to coordinate with their partners in the axis of resistance, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, because they've been significantly degraded by Israel and to a lesser degree the United States with the Houthis. But make no mistake, Iran can coordinate and sponsor terrorist attacks on its own through its own security services. There's an unconventional warfare wing within the IRGC known as the Quds Force and Iran's intelligence service. And again, history shows that in different moments, Iran will use these security elements and agencies to engage in unconventional warfare and terrorism. And then there's the threat to maritime shipping in the Persian Gulf. We haven't seen these kind of naval attacks with small boats and using them as in these kind of swarms for ramming boats or small arms attacks. But again, this is something that U.S. military planners have worried about for decades, that if Iran were to unleash that capability against shipping in the Persian Gulf or the Straits of Hormuz, that would be catastrophic potentially to the global economy. So these are, I'm not trying to say Iran is 10 feet tall, but at the same time, you can't underestimate them, especially in this really volatile moment when they are under serious pressure from Israel.
So Javed, that gives us a really good sense of their capabilities. But the underlying and always the rationale given by Israel for carrying out these attacks is that Iran is making a nuclear weapon and it is going to target Israel. To the best of your assessment, do the Israelis have a valid argument in that? Is Netanyahu accurate when he says this?
Well, this is the theory of the case that Prime Minister Netanyahu has claimed in his public statement overnight, and perhaps we'll hear more about that in the coming days, that the Israeli assessment was that they had enough intelligence to suggest that Iran was making strides in at least one phase of the nuclear weapons development cycle in terms of enriching uranium to levels that then would allow them relatively quickly to what is called sort of break out into potentially building an actual nuclear weapon. Now that doesn't happen overnight, wouldn't happen in hours. We're talking days, if not weeks. But that is the theory of the case, that Prime Minister Netanyahu says that is the picture that Israel had painted, and they were not going to let Iran get to this breakout stage. They were going to try to stop Iran right now, wherever they were in that uranium enrichment cycle. From the Israeli point of view, they view that as an existential threat to their country. So this is something that Israel has considered over time for years, if not the last couple decades. But I think it's all come to a head in the last 24 hours. And now the gloves are clearly off on Israel. And we'll see what, if anything, Iran can do to restore deterrence. Because if they can't, Israel is going to continue to relentlessly attack them, both in the physical infrastructure of their nuclear program or facilities, but also going after the key leadership. And we've seen the results of that.
Let me ask you about the U.S. role in all of this. So we're seeing reports from Associated Press that U.S. ground-based air defense systems are being used to help block the missiles from Iran getting into Israel. We're seeing reports by sources who don't want to be identified, but they are speaking under condition of anonymity to the Associated Press, saying that there are American assets moving closer and closer to Israel to be in a supportive role. How are we to interpret those actions?
That's not surprising to me, because this is something the United States has already done in the post-October 7th landscape. Immediately after October 7, 2023, in the aftermath of the terrible Hamas attacks against Israel, that the U.S. did exactly that it moved two carrier battle groups into the region, one off the coast of Israel, one into the Red Sea, in the aftermath of these Iranian missile attacks that I talked about earlier in April 2024 and October of 2024. The U.S. was significantly involved on the defensive side in intercepting the large majority of those weapons being fired by Iran. So the same thing is probably happening right now, in the sense of moving military capability, U.S. military capability, closer to the region beyond what's already there to support Israel in these defensive measures or defensive operations. But another one of these open questions is, if Iran holds the United States accountable for what Israel has done to Iran in these last 24 hours, would Iran attack U.S. interests? Actually, the Iranian defense minister basically said that boldly on Wednesday night. So 2 days or a day, 24 hours before Israel's attack started. That hasn't happened yet, but I would have to imagine the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, does not want to take on the United States right now, because Iran is in a bad position because of these Israeli military operations, and they would not be able to withstand for very long a two-pronged assault from both Israel and the United States.
We have seen these images from Tel Aviv, the sound of those sirens and the sound of the missiles coming through, and then the visual images of the impact taking place in Tel Aviv. And now we've got the images of the burning building. For us, it's been a shift in our broadcasting. Just seeing it and seeing the impact and the escalation of this back and forth between Iran and Israel has been quite powerful. For the Israelis and for the IDF, as well as for Netanyahu, does the fact that there has been a point of impact in Tel Aviv, that people may have been injured as a result, does that change the dynamic?
I don't think it changes the dynamic, however unfortunate things may be on the ground, because Iran has been hit so hard by Israel. And as I have said in this segment, and as I wrote or explained in the written piece, that Iran is going to be forced to respond in ways that they haven't had over the past couple of years in this conflict with Israel. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing play out, is that these Iranian attacks that are being launched are not just going to subside after today. And they have, again, thousands and thousands of missiles and drones that they can continue to fire at Israel. And it's unclear what their metric of success is. But even if one of those lands, and again, unfortunately, were to cause casualties on the ground, probably from the Iranian perspective, they would view that as a victory. However, terrible that sounds, but you have to try to get in the mindsets of their perceptions of what sort of hitting back against Israel looks like. So I think we're going to continue to see this over the next few days, and unless Iran decides that maybe now is the time to go back to the negotiations with the United States. And even though they have said, at least today, some of the statements that there's no appetite for that now, that things are very fluid. That could change a few hours from now or by tomorrow. So we're just going to have to wait and see how this plays out.
And could there be a scenario where they are meeting with the United States and Oman, having that conversation while simultaneously continuing some sort of battle with Israel?
Yeah, I mean, again, that is a possibility. How probable it is, unclear. But I would have to imagine, to me, what's more likely is you're going to see Iran dig in and for a while, and a while is probably days, if not longer, and try to resist these Israeli attacks and punch back in these different ways they can, or they will sort of stop fighting and resume negotiations. The simultaneous talk and fight, I would assess that as less likely, but I mean, I could be very wrong on that front. I just think it's more these polar opposites seem to me more likely than this middle ground that both you and I are discussing.
And what are you going to be watching for in the next couple of days, as you say, if things are just going to continue on this track?
Yeah, I'm going to be watching to see how Iran will be able to survive the sustained pressure they're already undergoing. And this includes the leadership losses of several key IRGC officials, which includes reportedly the head of the Quds Force, again, this unconventional warfare wing, the head of their air element and rocket element, the loss of several key Iranian nuclear scientists. The latest number I saw was 6. And will Iran move out from even these rocket and missile attacks into these other types of capabilities that we discussed a few minutes ago? These are all the things I think that will help give us indicators about whether we're going to see both sides continuing to fight each other, or things will wind down and Iran will try to get back to the negotiating table by the weekend.
Okay, Javed Ali, really great to get your perspective and your time on this today, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Natasha.